Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Jig Retro, and we're going to take a look at Time Crisis, one of my absolute favourite pick up and play games, and the light guns that go with it in the G-Con. We will go from the series' humble home conversion beginnings on the PlayStation 1 with Time Crisis and the G-Con 45, all the way to its attempted jump to HDMI and LCD screens with Time Crisis 4 on the PlayStation 3 with the Move controllers and the G-Con 3. If this episode doesn't give you a hankering for those old school light gun games, then I don't know what will. Thanks to the innovations in TV screens, it's unfortunately a genre that's been left in the past. If you enjoy this episode, then please take a moment out of your time to check out the rest of the videos in my catalogue, as well as like, share and subscribe. My journey into this subject comes from the very early stages of my retro video gaming collecting obsession. I always wanted representation of some of the best light gun games within my collection, but I didn't necessarily have room for the mandatory big box CRT television, which is a must for these types of games. For a good amount of time, the Wii was a great option with some great light gun shooters that work really well on modern displays. In fact, one of my more successful early videos was a look at light gun games on the console, so please check that out if you haven't done so already. More recently, when I did my top 10 PlayStation 1 video games, my passion for the Time Crisis series reared its head. I just had to find a way to play these games. This video comes about due to the research that I did and things that I discovered along the way that I don't think are necessarily public knowledge. I don't find many of these revelations on other videos about the subject on YouTube. Anyways, without further ado, here we go. So why is it a must to be a CRT for old light gun games? The way these light guns used to work is that every time you pulled the trigger, the game screen would briefly flash. The gun would then detect the group of pixels in the area of the screen that you were pointing the gun at the time when the screen flashed. There is a reason why this method doesn't work on modern LCD displays, something to do with them not having individual pixels, I guess. Way too technical for me. Having purchased myself a CRT telly recently, I can tell you that the experience is stunning, extremely responsive and super accurate, especially when, like me, you have been used to using Wii light gun games for quite some time. The Time Crisis port for the original PlayStation is great and is honestly a game that I have absolutely huge nostalgia for. It has a whole other story mode that is original for the PlayStation release, making it one of the better value games in the series. Don't forget to plug in the controller into the second player port on the system and press any button with your foot to duck for cover and reload, just like the foot pedal on the original arcade. As far as I'm aware, there is not an official foot pedal release for the game, which is a crying shame, but at least this method does work in one player for all the versions I have tested up until Time Crisis 3. I have seen people online who have had success in making their own pedal out of old PS1 controllers, and some seem to have had success with racing wheel pedals, but I can't confirm exactly which pedals work, so for me the second controller is a satisfactory option. The G-Con 45 is a fantastic first attempt at a light gun build by Namco, and I can easily argue that it is yet to be bettered across all the generations. It's robust feeling yet light and super accurate, with nice sights to look down for more precise shooting when it's needed. The only negative I have is that without the second controller foot pedal technique, your cover button is on the front and side, forcing you to hold it more like a stumpy rifle than a pistol. This aspect would be somewhat improved with the next iteration of the gun. Setup of the gun is simple with two choices: into the controller port and the yellow AV directly into the telly, or if your telly is too far away from the console for the AV to reach it, then you will need what is known as a Namco adapter, which can be bought together with the gun or sold separately. This bridges the PlayStation and the video out cable. Time Crisis Project Titan is the second Time Crisis game to feature on the PS1, and it is the only game to have not received an arcade version first. I believe that this is because Namco didn't want to port Time Crisis 2 to the PlayStation at this time, as the specifications for the arcade were far superior, that they wouldn't be able to do it justice at this time. That makes this game unique. Graphics have had a slight improvement over its predecessor, but I don't know if it's just a lack of nostalgia for it on my part, but I will always see it as the weakest entry in the series. It does try new things. You have to shoot arrows on the screen in order to move between a few different areas of cover, which is utilised most in the boss battles. This feature returns in the fourth installment. Otherwise, it's more of the same time-limited light gun action we know and love.
Reload. Where is he? There. Action. Get him. Reload.
Moving forward into the next generation, Time Crisis 2 received a fantastic port on the PlayStation 2 with an upgraded gun in the form of the G-Con 2. Time Crisis 2 saw a huge jump in graphics compared to the previous two games, even better than the arcade original, which had been out for some time at this point. This sequel featured a fantastic two-player element with the inclusion of two new protagonists. Even on a small telly, thanks to the G-Con being so accurate, this mode is surprisingly playable, but would be phenomenal with a system link and two CRTs for the full arcade experience. There is a new warning for enemy shots that are going to hit you in the form of huge red rings, which potentially make it easier to duck and dodge. These shots can happen from any enemy now, rather than being mostly unique to the red enemies of the previous games. There are now occasional new set pieces where you are armed with a machine gun to take down a tank or a turret and such like. The G-Con 2 is arguably the best light gun in this series, with a couple of huge positives making it potentially better than the original G-Con 45. One is that it's slightly more compact and potentially slightly lighter, making it easier for longer gaming sessions. The next resolves the only real issue that I had with the original G-Con 45, and that's that the hide and reload button is now located at the bottom of the handle of the gun, similar to the magazine area on a real gun. This means that now you can duck in and out of cover while still holding your gun like a pistol. Obviously this is negated by the use of the second controller as a foot pedal, as I described earlier anyway. There's a little D-pad on the back, but honestly I found little use for it in the short time that I owned a G-Con 2. Some negatives include it not being backwards compatible with PlayStation 1 games, even if you're running them on a PlayStation 2. Probably something to do with it being plugged in the USB controller port rather than a regular controller port. And the split between the USB port and the AV cable is horrifically short, meaning that you will almost certainly need an AV adapter, and ideally one with a splitter so that you can play two players, because you can't just chain up the AV cables like you could on the old model. In most other regions, after Time Crisis 2, most other games were not compatible with the original G-Con 45. When doing my research for collecting these amazing games, I thought that I'd need to have a G-Con 2 to play Time Crisis 3 for example, but thanks to a fellow retro geek buddy of mine, he corrected me and let me know that luckily in PAL Europe, for some reason, most of the PlayStation 2 games still work with the original G-Con 45. This is fantastic news for us, but honestly I have no idea why we were so special. This information really isn't well documented, so all I can suggest you do is look at the back of the game and the fine print to see if the G-Con 45 is compatible with it. Time Crisis 3 was the second game released for the mighty PlayStation 2, and in a lot of the same ways as Time Crisis 2 is a fantastic game to play. New mechanics include the ability to pick up ammo for multiple different weapons, such as a machine gun, a shotgun and a rocket launcher, and navigating when to use which gun in each scenario adds a fantastic strategy element. As said previously, in the PAL region only, this game is compatible with the original G-Con. So if you want to play this game in other regions, then you're going to have to look out for a G-Con 2.
Action.
Both me and my brother are huge light gun game fans, and when I started heading down the road of collecting some of these Time Crisis games, he sought to find a way of playing a Time Crisis game on his humble setup without buying a huge bulky CRT television like I'm fortunate enough to have in my game room. So he discovered Time Crisis 4 for the PlayStation 3, and I think this is where the series started to struggle a little bit, as this series was best suited for the accuracy of a light gun game on a CRT television. Namco's resolution to this jump to HD and LCD TVs was an upgraded G-Con in the G-Con 3. This iteration required a lot more technology in the form of sensors that you had to place around your telly in order to get the same accurate light gun game experience. This unfortunately at the time was very expensive for the consumer, a hassle to set up, and honestly not very aesthetically pleasing. I believe that once it is set up, it is a very accurate and good experience throughout. Although admittedly I haven't actually played one myself, so I can't really give you my thoughts. Time Crisis 4 Solo was released as a bundle with the new G-Con 3 and really is the only traditional light gun shooter released for the system, which is a shame because the light gun games are so well represented on the previous two PlayStations. Again, this is more of the same but with gorgeous looking full HD widescreen LCD glory. And because the new G-Con works with sensors, there is none of the screen flashing twitchiness that you get with a traditional light gun game. I don't love the new nanobot style sections or the fact that the game tells you exactly which is the best gun to use in each situation, but it is still an absolute blast. I think if you spend a good amount of money on this full setup, then you will have a fantastic time. But be aware, this initial solo release of Time Crisis 4 is not, and I repeat, is not compatible with the PlayStation Move controllers. My brother made this mistake, and to be fair, it's not something that's particularly well publicised, even within the YouTube community. I think due to the somewhat failure of Time Crisis 4, the success of the Wii motion controllers, and the release of the PlayStation Move, Namco decided to have a second attempt at creating a more Wii immersion type experience with Time Crisis Rising Storm. This was definitely a huge change of direction for the series, and to be honest, not really one that I was willing to entertain. The potential positive is that the release of this game came with a Move compatible version of Time Crisis 4 and a House of the Dead style Pirates of the Caribbean type game. This was my brother's opportunity to get the Time Crisis experience within his collection, and he went the whole hog. He bought 2 Move controllers, a PlayStation camera and the game itself, and 2 plastic gun-shaped things to plonk the Move controllers in. He invited me round and we had a quick blast. My opinion on this is honestly mixed at best. I came into it thinking it would at least be as good as the Wii light gun game experience, but in terms of accuracy, it couldn't hold a candle. If you were looking down the Move like a barrel of a gun, then the accuracy was so poor. Even after an hour of trying to calibrate to perfection, it would drift off massively in the game. And I can't believe this is something that fellow YouTubers don't really acknowledge in their reviews and experiences with the game. Some resolution could be had by pointing the Move controller way off the screen for a moment, or a fairly aggressive waggle, but this really was quite disappointing. On a positive note, it all looked stunning on the large HD TV, and this made the multiplayer experience really good, as we were sharing 2 halves of a much larger screen at this time. After this first session, I looked more into the Move's drift issue, and it turns out it's a pretty fatal flaw for the Move controllers on the whole. The advantage that the Wiimote has for these types of games is an infrared pointer, which the Move doesn't have. It just relies on the camera following the glowing ping pong balls. My next play with my brother was actually a far more positive experience. I ignored the accuracy of looking down the barrel and essentially used the Move as a means to move the on-screen crosshair. And in this sense, it was actually pretty fun all in all. I have suggested to my brother to save up for the G-Con 3 for a superior one-player experience and keep the Move controllers for some satisfying 2-player action. Hopefully I'll be able to do a follow-up video at some point reviewing Time Crisis 4 with the proper G-Con 3 full experience.
From every direction, machine gun. Then what's the shotgun? Take them all down! Machine gun. Take my extra ammo.
Hopefully you found this in-depth look at the Time Crisis and G-Con series of games informative and entertaining. I am so pleased that I finally get to play these awesome games on a regular basis and have them in the collection. It also proves that just sometimes there's absolutely no way around it, you have to go properly retro. Owning an old CRT has actually improved a lot of my experiences with my old consoles. Generally I've found that if it was built and made for an old CRT style telly, then it pretty much runs a lot better on them, including input lag. Highly recommended for all those uber retro video game geeks like myself who have plenty of room. If you have any advice on the drift issue that me and my brother were having, I'd love to hear from you in the comment section down below. Or if you have any recommendations for the PlayStation 1 or the PlayStation 2's lightgun game catalogue, again, I'd love to hear from you. As always, until next time, much love, please look after yourselves and each other and get your geek on with Jig Retro.